what's one of the reasons why you can look in some of your textbooks, that some of your textbooks are just really awful about this, and hear about all the terrible things that Columbus did. Did I explain this? Went out and systematically killing people and deliberately raping the women and just trying to kill as many Indians as possible. And you get that some of your textbooks talk about that. And you think, how could you put that in the textbook if there's no source for it? Well, there is a source for it. Did I not talk about this?
His journal?
No. You read his journal, and he's talking about thanking God like every other minute. Has nothing to do about raping women, ever, right? He's talking about spreading God's word. He's also talking about, wouldn't it be great if we got a ton of money, found some gold or spices, because if you remember, he was sent with a purpose. Now, with Queen Isabella, the purpose was to spread the faith, but what was the other goal? Right? To get something, to make it work. They spent a lot of money sending him out, and he comes back and said, well, I had a blast. No money, totally not. It's a waste of money on your side. But boy, did I have a lot of fun. Not going to happen, right? He has to justify why they gave the expense. So he's looking for spices. But you really have to understand, what's the likelihood, what in all likelihood is going to happen to Columbus? And just think for a second, if there was no New World, what would have happened? Like it went from Europe all the way to China. What would have happened to Columbus? This is an easy one, right? Just think world same size, no North and South America, and you go from Europe.
Oh, you would have died.
You died. There's no question. There's absolutely no problem about it at all. Totally dead. So the guy who's going on this trip, his likelihood is he's going to die, which is totally why, by the way, Ferdinand did not give him any money. Isabella, because she's kind of like a saint, says, I'll give you money so that before you die, you can spread the word out to people. Well, you're going to die. Nobody expects you to survive this. So the guy who's on this, it doesn't matter if you've got $1 trillion for doing this. If you die, what's the value? Zero. It's not worth anything. So that's not why you do this. You read his journal, you can see that it's because it's out there. It's exploration. He wants to do this. And most of the explorers are doing that. But the people that are footing the bill, that are at home, that never leave their castle, they want a return. Totally makes sense. So the reason why I say this is that the explorers are trying to find this. What Lynette's talking about, they're going out, right? But from the get-go, Columbus, as his reward, gets like Cuba. That's his reward, right? Whatever you conquer, if you saw it first, you get to claim it. And it goes back to the question, why do we have all these terrible stops? Well, what happens to Columbus? Does anybody know? Within a decade of him finding the New World.
He dies.
He dies! So who gets it afterwards?
His country.
His heirs get it. But is it absolutely a certain? Because did the heirs actually discover? It's the right of his discovery. You discover, you get to name it, you get to own it, right? For at least govern it. So what if you die in your heirs? They didn't do this. But, you die with $1 million, your kids get the $1 million. So you die with the rights to own, and remember this is feudalism, this isn't modern nation states. You die with the right to govern, say, Cuba. Then who gets that right? Well, the kids, unless you can convince the king that they don't deserve that right. And what would be the best way to convince the king that they don't deserve this right? Totally. That's exactly what it is. If you look, and you have to realize this is 1492, 1500, this is before modern nation states. This is way back in feudalism. 1400s feudalism. And so they're thinking feudal stuff. Lords, manors. They don't have modern nation states. They don't have wealth defined by money. It's defined by land. And so you go back to the Spanish court and you read some of this stuff. They are fighting each other left and right. Part of the reason why we know about Ponce de Leon. Ponce de Leon discovers Florida. What do you remember about Ponce de Leon? I told you about this. I'm writing this book. What's he do? Fountain of Youth. Did he actually go out and discover Florida looking for the Fountain of Youth? No, he was trying to find another island. And if you look at Florida, right? If you've been to Cuba, huge giant island. If you've been to the Dominican Republic, huge giant island. Puerto Rico, huge giant island. You go down to the bottom of Florida, what do you think it is?
Island.
A big giant island, right? It's the Keys. He wants another island. That's why he's there. But he dies, like, in his discovery. He gets kicked, hit in the leg with an arrow from one of the natives, goes back to Cuba, dies a terrible, painful death. So by right, his heirs get to rule Florida. Unless, kind of a crazy man, what would be the best way to say the crazy man? Totally irresponsible. He just went out, totally wild, right? He was looking for the Fountain of Youth. It's shocking how much, it's like us knowing, trying to learn about the political processes, reading the National Enquirer, 200 years from now. Oh, I got these really good, you didn't know this. Kennedy was a space alien. And he's still alive, they faked his death. And that's your source material. Yeah, it's 500 years old, right? Well, 500 years from now, they can still look at this. Is that credible? No, because they're fighting. They're deliberately trying to smear the other side. We get that from Columbus. We get this from most of the people. Now, if you happen to be one of these guys that's not progressive type or dialectical type, and all you're trying to find out is how horrible the Europeans are, which sources do you want to use? Hey, it says, this guy said that Columbus was out there literally raping whenever he could. Now, we won't look at Columbus's diary because he lied. But not this guy. He knows. Columbus is a scuzzball extraordinary. The point is, at this time, we think colonization, but what we're really thinking of is feudalism.